Okay, I'm Rick Tobin from Premier Hotel Realty, and we are here in South Florida. It's October 18th, 2024, and if you're watching this later, we just had really two hurricanes come through the state of Florida. Fortunately, where we are in Fort Lauderdale didn't get hit. We were out of the cone of danger, but a lot of the other state, pretty much all the rest of the state was, and I know after the first hurricane, we tried to get a hotel room to go to Tampa. Uh, Irrespective of the hurricane, found out a lot of hotels were flooded. I thought that it might be very interesting to have someone that I've known for a while, Michael Klavan, a public adjuster, talk about some of the issues with damages. My field is hotels. But most of this information applies to really any other commercial property or really any property in general. And Michael, why don't you tell a little bit about your background, who you are, and what your company does, so they know some background on this.
Good morning. I'm Michael Klavan. Thank you, Rick. It is great to be back home here in South Florida. I have been out in Central Florida and West Coast of Florida attending the claims from Helene and Milton. I am a public adjuster. I'm the owner of Adjusterman Public Adjusters. We are just shy now of our 10th year, starting our 10th year in business. February of 2015, we'll begin our 10th year in business. That's absolutely incredible to think about. I've been in adjusting now, I think 13 years altogether. I've been in insurance and financial services about 16, 17, handling claims, handling policies, helping people recover after large loss events like hurricanes, fires, vehicle impacts, and more. I've settled several claims on hotels, including a claim for America's most haunted hotel in St. Augustine, several hotels that were above 100 rooms. These are very large buildings, large facilities with multiple system damage issues to attend to. And so I have some experience in the field of settling large loss insurance claims for hotels, motels, and other large commercial properties. You have some
Excellent.
questions about what should we do? Go ahead, Rick.
So I do have a lot of questions, and once I started looking into this topic, I realized we could probably spend a week talking about some of the different issues. But
Easily.
there are three things that I'd like to hit on, and we can also put your contact information and the details. Your company's adjuster man, I know. We'll put some contact information so if somebody wants to get a hold of you and talk to you more. But there's really three issues. It's a three-part interview that I'd like to do with you. And just to let people know, I know that you work with and sometimes help people before disaster strikes, and some kind of disaster often hits anybody, hurricanes, fires, other things. But people should, if they're fortunate enough not to be damaged by this hurricane, and have a property that's in good shape, wasn't in the cone, how should they prepare is going to be my first issue. Secondly, if the property does get damaged, what should they do? Should they mitigate? How should they mitigate? Policy issues, that type of thing. And then the third thing that I'd like to get into is if somebody decides, hey, I'm not a professional, this is not what I do every day dealing with the insurance company, I'm thinking about hiring a public adjuster. People don't know that if they don't know, a public adjuster is someone that works for the insured, not for the company, and tries to get them compensated fully and completely. But that could be a daunting task to pick out a public adjuster. So how do they decide? So let's go to the first issue. I got a property, maybe it's a hotel.
Anecdotally, it's been my experience that the biggest disasters tend to happen at night, hurricanes tend to come ashore at night. And the later at night that my phone rings, the bigger the disaster that it is. If the phone is ringing at 7 o'clock, it's not so big. If the phone is ringing at like 1 a.m., it's pretty bad. But if the phone is ringing at 4 a.m., yeah, it's really bad. So number one piece of advice for all disasters, keep a flashlight handy. But when you're talking about disasters and you're talking about the potential for large loss, it's important to remember that prior planning is going to really help you determine how successful, how quickly your recovery is going to be. So some things to keep in mind, especially for a business owner: make sure you know where your policy is, and make sure you have at least a basic understanding of what you're covered for in the event of a loss. To have a business evacuation plan if you think that your business is going to be closed, and understand where your employees are going to go, what their route of travel is going to be. And then, of course, you need a plan for how to get your employees back in, because they're going to be the ones operating your business, and how you're going to support them in the immediate aftermath of a large scale disaster event where things like electricity, water, fuel may be very difficult, if not impossible, to come by. So you have to understand that there's going to be, typically after a large disaster, some type of lag period, 48 to 72 hours, while the initial damage assessments are completed by federal and state agencies, and people are allowed to begin returning to their homes and places of business. As you've seen with other hurricanes, there has been the result of some extensive flooding, some extensive road damage in other states, as well as here in Florida. And those types of situations certainly have to be taken into account when you're looking at, are my employees able to return to work? Are my customers able to return to patronizing my business? Is it really time for me to reopen and get this thing going again?
Let me back you up a little bit. So maybe even before disaster strikes, while you got a sunny day, a beautiful day, everything's good. What about taking a video of the property, documenting what you have, documenting the condition?
Absolutely.
So
Any types of collections as well that you might have as a business owner, perhaps that you have a hotel, and throughout the hotel you have some relatively good art that you've acquired through the years. You might have a collection that could easily be, $50,000-$100,000, and it's, a collection of art, but you have to make sure that it is properly insured on a rider for your policy for the property, because often things like contents are covered with sublimits, so that perhaps your TVs have a sublimit, your artwork has a sublimit, your small items, maybe you have a kitchen on premise and you have dishes and furniture, they may have a sublimit. You have linens on premise, the value of your linens, if they're owned or if they're leased, these things all need to be accounted for. Go back to the question again, Rick.
oh, this is a good question to discuss, I assume, with your insurance agent.
Certainly.
Before and when you're paying for your policy, making sure you get that policy that's going to cover you enough for when and if disaster happens. That's what insurance is for.
That's what insurance is for. It's also a good idea when you're considering a policy to present the policy to a public adjuster and have them look at what you're going to be actually covered for. Public adjusters are consumer advocates. They're here to represent the consumer and to be the ally of the consumer, and to be a policy expert, to be able to interpret policy, and to be able to help people to understand what their policies do and do not cover as written, so that they are able to understand what they will be able to recover from after a storm, and of course to be able to make changes to those policies prior, in the event that they're not covered for excess coverages for those things that I just mentioned, like art or linen or inventory on hand, things like this.
So that's something that I wouldn't have thought of to call a public adjuster, but that's something that's within your field to help somebody analyze their policy, know what's in there, maybe tell them how to document their
Certainly.
belongings and that type of thing.
Since the public adjuster is an advocate and isn't necessarily doesn't have any interest in or receive any reward for your purchasing the policy, you're getting an unbiased opinion as to what those coverages are and where you can improve. Whereas the agent certainly has an inherent bias in wanting to sell you a policy and wanting to earn a commission. And that's not to say that all insurance agents are somehow unfairly biased, but they are trying to sell you something, whereas the public adjuster evaluating your policy or your proposed policy isn't looking to sell you something, and so has less of a bias in terms of what they would be recommending for you in terms of changes that you might want to consider making to your coverage, adding more or paying for less types of coverages that maybe you realize you don't need.